Good day, everybody, and many thanks to Llewellyn, Leslie, and the Petrospot team for giving me this opportunity to share my presentation today. I'm going to be focusing upon marine fuel quality from Europe, and in the main, Northwest Europe. But the data I will present is based upon VPS data only. But as the world's leading marine fuel testing company, the database from which this information is drawn is the most comprehensive and representative regarding fuel quality. Over the past 15 months, VPS have been testing marine fuels which equate to approximately 5 million metric tons per month of bunkered fuel worldwide. However, January and February of 2021 saw lower bunkering volumes than the end of 2020. However, indications are that the March volumes are actually moving back up. Since December 2019, VLSFOs have been the most popular marine fuel of choice and currently account for 63% of all samples received by VPS. Therefore, for the majority of this presentation, I'm going to focus upon VLSFO quality in Europe. This region has also witnessed fluctuating VLSFO bunker volumes over the past 15 months, but averaging around about 500,000 metric tons per month. In February 2021, the highest volume VLSFO ports were Rotterdam, Antwerp, and Zeebrugge. With regard to HSFOs and MGO, we saw an immediate increase in MGO demand in January 2020 due to IMO 2020. However, this was short-lived and MGO demand dropped off in the subsequent months leading to the middle of the year, before returning to an average of around about 250,000 metric tons per month in Europe. With HSFO, this fuel accounted for 80% of the samples VPS received pre-IMO 2020. But demand dramatically fell during the final quarter of 2019 and into January 2020, where it accounted for only 12% of all of the fuel samples received by VPS. However, from the start of March 2020, we saw successive month-on-month increases in HSFO, indicating an increase in scrubber usage to the point where in March 2021, we've seen the highest HSFO levels since pre-IMO 2020. Apart from some minor fluctuations, density figures are relatively stable for the region. However, Europe has relatively higher density VLSFOs, but note 84% of all tested VLSFO samples in February 2021 fell within the 921 to 980 kilogram per meter cube range. Given the relative stable development of VLSFO density, as well as the relatively low number of VLSFO off-specs due to high density, this seems to be one of the quality parameters that is least likely to cause operational issues, as very high density VLSFOs are quite uncommon in today's bunker market. This is in sharp contrast with the traditional HSFOs, where density and viscosity were the most common off-spec parameters. The vast majority of VLSFOs offered in the market are well below 180 centistokes. These days, it's very rare to see a VLSFO with a viscosity which is greater than 380 centistokes. In fact, 47% of European VLSFOs actually have a viscosity of less than 110 centistokes. While viscosity off-specs were commonplace for HSFO, mainly when viscosity exceeded the ISO 8217 spec limit, with VLSFO, the opposite has occurred. VLSFO viscosity is often too low compared to the grade supplied, leading to leakages within the fuel system, which is exacerbated when the fuel is heated, for example, in the case of high pour point or high wax appearance temperature. Unlike the distillate grades, where ISO 8217 has a specified maximum and a minimum limit for viscosity, for residual grades, including VLSFO, there is only a maximum limit. This allows suppliers to supply low viscosity fuels under a high ISO category, which can sometimes become challenging for the operators to manage. In Europe, we have seen increases in the 21 to 50 centistoke and the 51 to 80 centistoke ranges. This indicates lighter fuel blends entering the local market. The graph shown compares the distribution of net specific energy for HSFO, VLSFO, ULSFO, and MGO fuel types. As would be expected, MGO and ULSFO typically offer the highest energy content out of all of the commercially available marine fuels. HSFO offers the lowest energy content, typically in the 39 to 41 megajoules per kilogram range. VLSFO occupies the middle range, with 88.8% of tested VLSFOs falling within the 41 to 42 megajoule per kilogram category. However, 11% of tested VLSFOs offer a calorific value of over 42 megajoules per kilogram, which would typically be considered the territory for ULSFOs and MGOs. It is important to mention that these high energy VLSFOs typically have other characteristics which are similar to distillate fuels, such as very low viscosity, and therefore should be managed accordingly. Sulfur was the key driver for the introduction of VLSFOs, yet of all of the world's regions, we have witnessed Europe struggle the most to achieve compliant VLSFO fuels. In December, 9% of European VLSFOs exceeded the 0.50% sulfur spec limit. This position actually worsened in January 2021, when over a quarter of all VLSFOs tested from Europe exceeded the 0.50% level. Thankfully, February saw a dramatic reduction in VLSFOs exceeding the 0.5% sulfur level, with a drop to only 4.3% of the fuels exceeding the compliant limit. The anticipated high cat fine levels in VLSFOs didn't actually materialize, and cat fines have been relatively low and stable within this fuel type. We do get occasional spikes, such as in February 2021, when we saw a case of 262 ppm in Rotterdam and 106 ppm in Antwerp. However, almost 90% of VLSFOs have cat fine levels which are less than 40 ppm, and around 10% are between the 41 to 60 ppm limit, with only 0.4% of fuels tested being actually greater than the 60 ppm spec limit. The formation of wax during the storage, transfer and consumption of VLSFOs has been one of the major sources of operational problems. As such, it's important to test for wax appearance temperature and wax disappearance temperature, as the pour point is not really a reliable indicator of the cloud point of the fuel. Whilst the majority of tested VLSFOs have pour points below 30 degrees centigrade, the wax appearance temperature and wax disappearance temperatures are often much higher than this. Globally, currently only 39% of tested VLSFOs have a wax appearance temperature below 30 degrees centigrade, and a staggering 68.1% of all VLSFOs tested have a wax disappearance temperature of greater than 40 degrees centigrade. These are incredibly important measures, as they illustrate that using the plus 10 degrees centigrade above pour point as an indicator of the cold flow properties of VLSFO blends is simply insufficient, as well as inappropriate as a risk mitigation measure. Only by testing the fuel on wax appearance temperature can VLSFO consumers be certain of the required storage, transfer and treatment temperatures. Elevated wax appearance temperature and wax disappearance temperature could result in wax formation unless purifiers' separation temperatures are maintained above the wax appearance temperature. If the fuel at any time during storage and transfer has fallen below the wax appearance temperature, then the fuel may have to be heated above the wax disappearance temperature in order to melt the wax formed when the temperature fell below the wax appearance temperature. As these temperatures are relatively high, and since not all vessels are capable of heating the fuels to these temperatures, especially in the case of low viscosity fuels, it is crucial to test your VLSFOs for wax appearance temperature and wax disappearance temperature. We have seen a number of VLSFOs being delivered to vessels without issue and on specification, but then within weeks, these fuels have destabilized, causing operational problems. We would highlight that VLSFOs have only a 3-month shelf life compared to 6 months for HSFO and 12 months for MGO. In addition, there is a careful balance and monitoring required if elevating the heating of the fuel for prolonged periods in order to overcome potential waxing, and this can cause obviously thermal degradation within the fuel. In summary, the takeaways from this presentation are: we are currently seeing VLSFOs accounting for 63% of all samples tested by VPS, with HSFO at 22%, MGO at 13%, and ULSFOs at 2%. Over the past 12 months, there's been an increasing demand for HSFO, potentially indicating a higher scrubber usage across the fleet. And whilst European VLSFO densities are higher than the other regions, density levels are low and stable, with the majority falling within the 921 to 980 kilogram per meter cube range. The vast majority of VLSFOs offered in the market are less than 180 centistokes. During February 2021, in Europe, we saw increases in the 21 to 50 centistoke and 51 to 80 centistoke ranges, indicating lighter fuel oil blends entering the local market. For net specific energy, VLSFO occupies the middle range, with 88.8% of tested samples falling within the 41 to 42 megajoule per kilogram category. It's fair to say that Europe has struggled more than other regions to provide compliant fuel at less than 0.50% sulfur. Cat-fine levels of VLSFOs are relatively low and stable, with only 0.4% actually exceeding the 60 ppm spec limit. The formation of wax during storage, transfer and consumption of VLSFOs has caused major operational problems and further hampered fuel stability issues. And Europe has shown the highest level of off-spec VLSFOs, especially in relation to sulfur. I do hope you found this presentation of interest, and I do look forward to any questions you may have during the Q&A session. Thank you very much.